This is Nathan MacKinnon, and he just experienced, in his own words, the most gutting loss of his NHL career. The Avalanche entered the previous season campaign with high hopes. They were one of the favorites to win the Cup, had three of the game's most talented players, and after coming up short in the years prior, they had a chip on their shoulder, preparing for what would arguably be the most interesting year in Avalanche history. But from the very start of the season, the Avalanche faced adversity, from contract drama to injuries, all the way to completely turning over their whole roster before the playoffs even began. But was this all avoidable, and could the Avalanche have done things differently? Well, let's talk about this past season for Colorado to determine if their hopes for a dynasty are officially over, or if this is just a temporary setback. Playoff losses can be gutting. It feels like your heart is being ripped out of your chest as you're forced to contemplate the emotions that go along with your favorite team being eliminated. And while crushing, this setback is something that in hindsight we all should have saw coming. The Avalanche dealt with plenty of drama through this past season, including trading one of their top players as well as overhauling their entire roster. And while they did meet some of the expectations we had for this team throughout the year, ultimately they came up short. Begging the question, is this dynasty run over for the Avalanche, or is this a temporary setback? Well, to better understand this, we need to go through what happened this past year to see if the Avalanche have something here to build off of, or if this is going to be too much for them to overcome. The start of the season didn't go according to plan for the Avalanche. They would lose the first 4 games of the year, allowing 25 goals over that span, with the most notable issue, the team's goaltending. Georgiev's regression was not something the Avs anticipated, but in general, their goaltending was struggling no matter who started. It was clear that a change was needed for the Avalanche, and eventually they decided to part ways with their once-beloved starter in exchange for 2 new goalies, Scott Wedgwood and Mackenzie Blackwood. At the time, this felt like a bit of a lateral move. Yes, fans were just overwhelmingly happy to move on from Georgiev after his brutal start, but Mackenzie Blackwood was still an unproven starter in this league. So Colorado was putting a lot of faith in the fact that he showed potential early on in his career and that he could get back to that position, something that ended up paying off for the team. Through his time with the Avalanche this past season, Mackenzie Blackwood posted a .912 save percentage and a 2.55 goals against average, earning himself a new contract with the Avalanche worth 5 years at $5.25 million per season. This was the first chip to fall for the Avalanche. Just a month later, the Avs would break the NHL news landscape once again by finally making a decision on the Rantin contract extension. And let's just say it wasn't exactly what fans were hoping for. In a 3-team trade, the Avalanche would move on from their franchise winger, sending him to the Carolina Hurricanes along with Taylor Hall in exchange for Martin Necas, Jack Drury, and some picks. The Chicago Blackhawks would receive a 3rd-round pick in this 3-team trade to retain 50% of Rantin's salary. Now, I'm sure you've all read and watched a million videos on the mikkorantanen side of this trade, so I'll toss that up at the top of the screen if you want to watch that after this video. But for what we're doing today, I think it's more important to focus on the other side of this story, which is what happened to the Avalanche for the rest of the year following this move. At face value, many felt like the Avs were in a good position following this trade. Heck, maybe they even won the deal given how the first month went. Necas was having a career season in Carolina. He was top 10 in points before the trade and continued to excel through his regular season time with the Avalanche. Necas is a quick skater and can play, make, and score with the best of them, making him a perfect winger to pair alongside MacKinnon. While his numbers slightly dropped off following the trade, he still managed to put up 28 points in 30 games. Meanwhile, Rantin with Carolina only put up 6 in 13 games played. Colorado had finally found some stability in an otherwise unpredictable season. Looking to build off of this with some additional cap space from the Rantin trade, the Avs were maybe the most aggressive team of the deadline, acquiring Ryan Lindgren from the New York Rangers, Charlie Coyle from the Bruins, and Brock Nelson from the Islanders. These moves finally addressed the Avalanche's biggest issue, which was their center depth. This was something that they had been experiencing for quite some time, essentially all the way back to when they let Nazem Kadri walk in free agency. And while for a moment it put the Avalanche ahead of some of the other teams in their division, they would shockingly see another trade happen with one of their biggest rivals that would change everything. Rumors started to circulate overnight of Mikko Rantanen being traded once again, but this time it was to a team that the Avalanche could never have predicted. Rantanen was traded to the Dallas Stars for a package including Logan Stankoven and picks. This was a significant addition to an already stacked lineup that had been built in Dallas, not to mention the mental gymnastics that the Avalanche would experience in a playoff series, with the two essentially being destined to face off in the first round. Through the last month and a half of the season, the Avalanche played well, but not well enough to catch either the Stars or the Jets in the standings. The Jets would go on to be first in their division and win the President's Trophy, while the Stars would lock up that number 2 seed in the Central Division. This meant that the Avs and the Stars were set to face off in the first round, and the storyline for this one wrote itself. Rantanen versus the Avs. Would Colorado be justified in trading one of their best players, or would Rantanen get his revenge? Game 1 was a huge momentum booster for Colorado. They shut down Dallas's offense and managed to pick apart their defense, grabbing an all-too-important road win to begin the series. This momentum, however, was short-lived. Dallas would grab the next 2 games despite only leading for 62 seconds in the first 3 bouts. Not to mention, Game 3 featured the return of Gabe Landeskog, a game filled with inspiration and emotion for the Avs, but still, they lost. Game 4, the Avalanche would respond by getting a shutout and seeing Landeskog score his first goal since their cup run back in 22. But the biggest issue for the Avalanche throughout their first round matchup was not being able to build off the momentum they had gained from victories. In Game 5, they were blown out by Dallas on the road in a 6-2 defeat, forcing them into an elimination game as they headed back home for Game 6. Desperate to stay alive, the Avalanche and the Stars put on a show, combining for 11 goals that game as the Avs forced the Game 7 with a blowout 7-4 victory in their own barn. Game 7, and like I said, this matchup wrote itself. Colorado would score the first 2 goals of the game, keeping a 2-0 lead with 12 minutes to go in the third period. And this is where disaster struck. The Avalanche's worst nightmare became reality. Rantanen would score the first goal of the game for the Stars, ripping one past Blackwood to cut into the lead. Moments later, he would surge into the zone and get a fortunate bounce off a defender from a wraparound attempt to tie things up and bring the Dallas crowd and players back into this game. With a tied-up match, Dallas would feed Wyatt Johnston cross ice where he would tuck the eventual game-winning goal for the Stars. With the Colorado netminder going to the bench with one last hope of getting this game back into reach, Mikko Rantanen would cap off his 4-goal night with an empty net hat trick, getting his ultimate revenge on a team that he once loved. The Avalanche were shocked, but there were some specific reasons why this team lost this series. First is their power play, something that completely crippled them throughout the postseason. During the regular season, they finished 8th in the league with a success rate of 24.8%. In the playoffs, of 16 teams, they ranked 14th with a success rate of 13.6%. A drop-off that was nearly half their production from the regular season. The next thing was their 5-on-5 chances. While the Avalanche had 57.3% of the 5-on-5 shot attempts in this series, at times they just couldn't finish, and that ultimately is what did them in. The next thing was their ability to finish in the clutch, and let's go through a few scenarios. In Game 2, they had led 3-2 before Dadonov scored to tie things up 3-3. In Game 3, they had led 1-0 until Jamie Benn scored on the power play to tie things up 1-1. Both times they were up in those games, but the Stars were resilient enough to come back and beat them in the clutch. Lastly, we can't forget about Game 7. They led 2-0 before Rantanen took over and sent them home because of their mistakes. And the last thing I want to talk about is goaltending. Mackenzie Blackwood went 3-4 with his record, having a 2.71 goals against average, an .892 save percentage with 1 shutout. For the Dallas Stars, Jake Ottinger went 4-3 with a 2.85 goals against average and a .911 save percentage. Blackwood, while brilliant at times in this series, was a bit inconsistent. A couple of his best games included Game 1 where he stopped 22 of 23 shots for a 5-1 victory, or Game 4 where he had 23 saves to shut out the Stars and get the Avs back in this series. In the end, Ottinger was tested more often and ultimately won the battle, which was a difference for this one. Truthfully though, this whole thing could be summarized just like this. The Avalanche should have won this series. The Stars were injured, the Avalanche were remade, and added all of the essential pieces that they needed to go on a deep run, including players like Nelson, Coyle, Drury, Blackwood, and Wedgwood, not to mention the return of Gabriel Landeskog. This is just another year of MacKinnon and Makar's prime gone with nothing to show for it, another year where the Avalanche failed to meet their potential. But after 3 years of falling short, should you really be optimistic about next season, or should you expect something similar to this past one? In a nutshell, yeah, I expect the Avalanche to be better next season, and you should be optimistic. Gabe Landeskog is finally going to have a preseason and training camp to revamp himself and not just be thrusted into playoff hockey. You still have Nathan MacKinnon and Cale Makar, who are top 5 players in the world. Brock Nelson is re-signed, so you have your second-line center, and your goaltending should be much more stable. I expect their power play to get back to that great point. I expect Martin Necas to still be a point-per-game player, and I expect the Avalanche to be just as competitive, if not more than they were last season. Question is, will it translate to the playoffs, and will they finally be able to get back to that dominant team that they were in 2022? It's yet to be seen, but I'm a believer in their core players, and I think that you should be as well. So let me know what you think in the comments below about the Avalanche this past season and what you should expect this next season. And if you guys enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe now. I also have a few other pieces of content here for you on the screen to check out if you're bored throughout the off season. And again, thank you guys so much for watching this video. I will see you in the next upload.